He was a decorated Green Beret with top-level clearance. She was a rookie cop with a God complex and a history of profiling. When Officer Serena Hale profiled Darius on his own property, she thought she had an easy target. She had the gun, the badge, and the handcuffs. But she made one fatal mistake. She let him make a phone call. Not to a lawyer, not to his wife, but to the Pentagon. What happens next isn't justice. It's a masterclass in karma that will leave you breathless. This is the story of how one racist officer lost everything. The sun was just beginning to dip below the horizon in Oak Haven, a suburb that prided itself on manicured lawns, silent hybrid cars, and a distinct lack of outsiders. It was the kind of place where the homeowners association measured the height of your grass with a ruler. Darius Eli Hayes parked his matte black Ford F-150 in the driveway of Cedar Lane. The house was a sprawling, mid-century modern renovation that had been sitting on the market. Darius stepped out, stretching his back. With a build that still screamed Special Forces despite being retired, Darius was an imposing figure. He wore a simple gray t-shirt, cargo work pants, and heavy boots. He wasn't just looking at the house. He owned it. He had closed the deal in cash, a retirement gift to himself and his fiancée, Alara. After years of service that had taken him from the sands of Iraq to the mountains of Afghanistan, Darius walked to the bed of his truck and pulled out a heavy toolbox. He wanted to fix the loose hinge on the front gate before Alara saw it tomorrow. He hummed a low tune, the smell of cedar and fresh rain in the air. For the first time, his nervous system wasn't scanning for snipers or IEDs. He was just a man fixing a gate. Across the street, behind lace curtains that hadn't been washed since the Reagan administration, Mrs. Thorne was watching. Mrs. Thorne was the self-appointed neighborhood watch captain, a woman who had 911 on speed dial for anything ranging from a stray cat to a delivery driver who looked suspicious. She squinted. She didn't see a new neighbor. She didn't see a veteran. She saw a black man in a dirty t-shirt tampering with the gate of a vacant luxury home. "Not in my neighborhood," she muttered, her fingers trembling with a mix of fear and excitement as she dialed the non-emergency line. "Yes, hello." "It's Mrs. Thorne again." "Yes, there's a man. He's breaking into the empty house on Cedar. He looks aggressive. He has a crowbar." It was a wrench, but to Mrs. Thorne, context didn't matter. Miles away, Officer Serena Hale was sitting in her cruiser parked behind a billboard, scrolling through her phone. Serena was with years on the force and a disciplinary file that was thicker than her training manual. She had a reputation. In the locker room, they called her the Pit Bull. On the streets, the locals called her something much worse. She had a specific way of policing, aggressive, loud, and instinctively biased against anyone who didn't look like her father, the former chief of police. The dispatch crackled. Unit 4 Alpha. Suspicious person reported at Cedar. Possible B&E in progress. Subject is a black male, large build, wielding a crowbar. Serena's eyes lit up. A B&E in Oak Haven. That was a felony stop. That was adrenaline. That was a chance to show the new sergeant she wasn't just a liability. "For Alpha copy, I'm out," she said into the radio, flipping on her lights. She didn't turn on the siren. She wanted to catch him in the act. Back at the house, Darius tightened the last bolt on the gate. He tested it. Smooth. He smiled, wiping grease onto a rag. He turned to walk back to his truck to get a bottle of water. That's when the cruiser screeched to a halt at the bottom of the driveway, blocking him in. Darius froze. He knew the sound of aggression. He slowly placed the rag on the hood of his truck and held his empty hands out to his sides, palms open. It was a reflex honed by survival, not guilt. Officer Hale didn't walk up the driveway. She marched. Her hand was already resting on the grip of her service weapon, the holster strap undone. "Step away from the vehicle," she screamed, her voice cracking with artificial authority. "Officer," Darius said, his voice a deep, calm baritone. I said, "Step away from the vehicle. Hands where I can see them." "My hands are visible, officer," Darius said, not moving an inch. He knew that sudden movements in front of a nervous cop were a death sentence. "I am the owner of this property. My wallet is in my back right pocket. It contains my ID, and the deed papers are on the passenger seat." Hale stopped feet away. She looked him up and down. She didn't see a homeowner. She saw the suspect, the cargo pants, the boots, the size of him. "Don't give me that crap," she spat. "We got a call. Breaking and entering. You're holding a weapon." Darius looked down at the wrench sitting on the toolbox away. "That is a wrench. I was fixing the gate." "I told you to shut up," Hale yelled, closing the distance. "Turn around. Hands on the hood." "Now, officer, I'm cooperating," Darius said, his voice hardening slightly. "But you were making a mistake." "And I'm the Queen of England," Hale sneered. She grabbed his wrist, yanking it behind his back. Darius didn't flinch. He was a man who had wrestled insurgents and carried wounded men miles through jungle terrain. Hale's grip felt like a child's, but he didn't resist. He let her twist his arm, leaning forward against the hot metal of his truck. "You're hurting my rotator cuff," Darius stated flatly. "I have a service injury." "Stop resisting!" Hale shouted, though he wasn't moving. She kicked his legs apart hard. "Service injury? Yeah, right. What, you trip running from the cops?" Darius closed his eyes. He took a deep breath. Controlled rage. That was the training. Do not engage. Do not escalate. Survive. "I am a master sergeant, retired United States Army Special Forces," Darius said, enunciating every word. "Check my ID." Hale paused for a split second. The specific rank and tone sounded real, but her ego was already in the driver's seat. If she backed down now, she'd look weak. "Stolen valor, too. You're racking up the charges, buddy." She laughed, clicking the first cuff onto his left wrist. As she reached for his right hand, Darius's phone sitting on the truck's hood buzzed. The screen lit up. The caller ID didn't show a name. It just said, "The Pentagon, Priority 1. Hale saw it. She froze. Darius saw her hesitation. "Officer, I have a scheduled debriefing call that I cannot miss. It is a matter of national security. I strongly suggest you let me answer that." Hale looked at the phone, then back at Darius. She saw the defiance in his eyes. She felt small. She hated feeling small. She grabbed the phone and slid it across the hood, knocking it onto the grass. "You aren't answering anything," she hissed. She unholstered her taser, pointing it at his chest. "Get on the ground now, or I will light you up." Darius looked at the phone in the grass. It was still ringing. He looked at Hale. "You just made a very expensive mistake," Darius said quietly. "On the ground." Darius slowly lowered himself to his knees, keeping his hands visible. Hale holstered the taser and drew her firearm. She pointed the Glock 17 directly at his head. "Face down. Eat dirt." By now neighbors were coming out. Mrs. Thorne was watching from her porch, looking smug, but others, Mr. Novak, a retired lawyer, and young Alara Jenkins, with her phone out, looked horrified. "He lives there," Alara Jenkins shouted from the sidewalk. "I saw the realtor give him the keys." "Back up!" Hale screamed at the civilians, waving the gun recklessly between Darius and the crowd. "This is an active crime scene." Darius lay on the asphalt, the gravel dug into his cheek. He could see his phone in the grass. The ringing had stopped. Then it started again. "Officer," Darius said, his voice muffled by the ground. "If you don't pick that up, you're going to have federal agents swarming this block. That is a satellite-linked line." Hale pressed her knee into Darius's back, right between his shoulder blades. She leaned down, whispering in his ear, "You think you can scare me with a spoofed number? I'm the law here. You're just another thug." She reached for her radio. "Dispatch, I have one male in custody, resisting, hostile, requesting backup." But before she could release the button, a voice boomed from the end of the street. Not a siren, a voice. "Police, drop the weapon now." It wasn't backup. Hale's head snapped up. Two black SUVs had just torn around the corner, hopping the curb and boxing in her cruiser. They didn't have police markings. They had government plates. 4 men in tactical suits poured out. They weren't holding tasers. They were holding MK-18 rifles aimed squarely at Officer Serena Hale. "Drop the weapon and step away from the asset," the lead agent screamed. Hale was stunned. Her brain couldn't process the shift. "I'm an officer. He's a suspect," she yelled back, keeping her gun trained on Darius. "This is your final warning," the agent shouted. "Drop it or we will engage." Hale looked at the men. These weren't local cops. These guys looked like, well, they looked like Darius. She slowly, tremblingly lowered her gun to the ground. She raised her hands. "Step away." She backed up, hands in the air. "He attacked me. He has a weapon," she lied, desperate to control the narrative. The lead agent ignored her. He holstered his rifle and sprinted to Darius. He didn't treat him like a suspect. He knelt down, uncuffing him with a key he pulled from his own vest. "Sergeant Hayes," the agent said, helping Darius to his feet. "Status." Darius rubbed his wrists. He stood up, dusting off his cargo pants. He looked at Hale, who was now being forced against the hood of her own cruiser by 2 other agents. "I'm fine, Agent Voss," Darius said calmly. "Just a little local misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Agent Voss looked at Hale with eyes like cold steel. She had a loaded weapon pointed at the back of a Tier 1 asset's head. Hale was hyperventilating. "Asset, he's a burglar. Who are you people?" Darius walked over to the grass and picked up his phone. He wiped the dirt off the screen. He looked at Hale. "Officer Hale," Darius said, "I tried to tell you I'm not a burglar. I'm a consultant for the Defense Intelligence Agency, and I was in the middle of a check-in regarding a classified operation when you decided to play cowboy." I didn't know," Hale stammered. Her bravado was evaporating like water on hot pavement. "Ignorance isn't a defense for violating civil rights," Darius said. "And it certainly isn't a defense for assaulting a federal officer." "A federal officer?" Hale's face went pale. "Retired active duty," Darius corrected. "But currently contracted, which means you just held a gun to the head of the United States government." Just then, a sleek sedan pulled up. The door opened and a man in a police uniform stepped out. It was Chief Novak, Hale's boss, and he looked furious. But he wasn't looking at Darius. "Hale!" the chief roared. "What in God's name have you done, Chief?" "He resisted these men. They assaulted me," Hale cried, playing the victim card one last time. Chief Novak walked right past her to Darius. He extended a hand. "Mr. Hayes, I am so sorry. I got a call from the governor's office. They said you triggered a distress signal." Darius shook the chief's hand firmly. "I didn't trigger it, Chief. Your officer did when she knocked my secure line into the dirt." He turned to Hale. "I offered to show you my ID. You refused," I offered to explain. "You refused. You saw a black man, an assumed criminal, and now you're going to learn that actions have consequences. Chief, are you listening to him? Hale shrieked. He's lying. Agent Voss stepped forward, holding up a small black device. Body cam footage doesn't lie, officer, and neither do our satellite feeds. We have the whole thing recorded from 3 different angles. Hale felt the world spin. Am I under arrest? She whispered. Not yet. First, I have one phone call to make, and this time, you're going to let me make it. Darius dialed a number on his phone. He put it on speaker. General Lang, Darius said. A gravelly voice answered. Hayes, are you safe? Secure, General. But we have a situation with local law enforcement. I have an officer, Serena Hale, here who seems to think federal laws don't apply to her. She assaulted me, damaged government property, and pointed a loaded firearm at my head without cause. There was a silence on the line, a terrifying silence. Put her on, the general said. Darius held the phone out to Hale. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold it. This is Officer Hale, she squeaked. Officer Hale, the voice growled. My name is Lieutenant General James Lang. You have exactly seconds to hand your badge and your weapon to your chief, or I will have military police at your precinct to strip them from you by force. Do I make myself clear? Yes, sir, Hale sobbed. Do it, the general commanded. And Hale, you better pray to whatever God you believe in that Sergeant Hayes decides not to press charges, because if he does, I will personally ensure you spend the next years in Leavenworth. The line went dead. Hale looked at Chief Novak. The chief held out his hand, palm up, expectant. Badge gun. Now, the chief said, his voice devoid of sympathy. Hale unclipped her badge. Her fingers fumbled. It fell to the ground with a metallic clatter, the symbol of her power lying in the dirt next to Darius's boots. But the nightmare for Hale was just beginning. The silence in the precinct interrogation room was heavy smelling of stale coffee and fear. Officer Serena Hale sat on the metal chair, her wrists handcuffed to the table loop, a position she had placed hundreds of people in, but one she never imagined she would occupy. Across from her wasn't her sergeant or the local internal affairs captain. It was Agent Voss from the scene and a woman in a sharp navy blazer, introduced as Special Prosecutor Rebecca Lewis. Lewis had a reputation in the state. They called her the Scalpel because she didn't just win cases. She dissected the defendants until there was nothing left. My father is Harlan Novak, Hale said, her voice trembling, but still clinging to a shred of entitlement. He was the chief here. You can't hold me. This is a misunderstanding. Rebecca Lewis didn't look up from her file. She slowly turned a page. Your father has been notified. Ms. Hale. He is currently in the lobby, but we aren't letting him back here because this isn't a local disciplinary hearing. This is a federal inquiry into civil rights violations and assault on a federal contractor. I followed protocol, Hale insisted, sweat beading on her forehead. He was aggressive. He refused to identify himself. Agent Voss leaned forward, placing a laptop on the table. Let's watch the tape, shall we? He pressed play. The footage from Hale's own body cam, which she had forgotten to mute, played back in a high definition. Stolen valor, too. You're racking up the charges, buddy. Digital. Hale sneered on the screen, sneered on. In the room, the real Hale flinched. Then came the audio from the phone call. I have a scheduled debriefing call. The Pentagon. And then the damning moment, the visual of Hale slapping the phone off the hood. That, Agent Voss pointed to the screen, is destruction of evidence and interference with a federal operation. But that's not the worst part, Hale. Rebecca Lewis finally looked up. Her eyes were ice blue and devoid of mercy. When we seized your body cam data, we found something interesting. You have a folder of flagged incidents that were supposedly deleted from the main server, but remained on the local drive. A blooper reel? You called it in your text messages to Officer Griggs? Hale's face went ghost white. I don't know what you're talking about. Lewis read from a paper. You pulled over a college student, avidly searched his car without probable cause, found nothing, and then planted a bag of marijuana from your own pocket to justify the arrest. The body cam caught the reflection of you pulling the baggie from your vest in the side mirror. Hale gasped. She hadn't noticed the mirror. Lewis continued, her voice monotone. You responded to a noise complaint at a barbecue. You pepper-sprayed a grandmother in a wheelchair because she looked threatening. You wrote in your report she lunged at you. The video shows she was asleep. Lewis slammed the folder shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the small room. We aren't just charging you for what you did to Darius Hayes, Ms. Hale. We are reopening every single arrest you have made. We are looking at counts of obstruction, counts of filing false reports, and counts of assault under color of authority. Hale began to cry, not tears of remorse, but tears of a bully who had finally met a bigger stick. I just wanted to keep the streets safe, she sobbed. I'm a good cop. No, Agent Voss said, standing up and towering over her. You're a predator with a badge, and the hunt is over. If the interrogation room was hell, the outside world was the apocalypse. The footage of Darius's arrest had leaked. It wasn't leaked by the police. It was live-streamed by Alara Jenkins, the neighbor who had shouted from the sidewalk. The video, titled Hero Veteran versus Racist Cop, had millions of views. The internet did what the internet does best. They found everything. Hashtag #FireHale was the #1 trend globally on X, formerly Twitter. People had dug up her high school yearbook photos, her old Facebook posts complaining about thugs in her neighborhood, and even a video from a traffic stop where she screamed at a terrified DoorDash driver. Darius, meanwhile, sat in his living room, the same house he had almost been arrested for entering. The boxes were unpacked. His fiancée, Alara, sat next to him, holding his hand. Across from them sat Tariq Lang, the most shark-like civil rights attorney in Chicago. Lang wore suits that cost more than Hale's annual salary and had a smile that terrified insurance adjusters. Darius, Lang said, scrolling through a tablet. The offers are already coming in. The city wants to settle. They are terrified. They are offering $2 million to make this go away quietly. Darius looked at Alara, then out the window at the gate he had fixed. It's not about the money, Tariq, Darius said quietly. If we settle, she gets to resign quietly. She keeps her pension. She moves 2 counties over and gets hired by another department. I've seen it happen a dozen times. So, what do you want to do? Lang asked. Darius's eyes hardened. I want to go to trial. I want everything on the record. I want her name to be so radioactive that she can't get a job guarding a parking lot. And they did just that. The civil trial was a spectacle. The courtroom was packed. Outside, protesters held signs supporting Darius. Hale's defense attorney, a court-appointed lawyer because the police union had refused to pay for her private counsel, a massive red flag, tried the fear for safety defense. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the lawyer stammered. Officer Hale is a slight woman. Mr. Hayes is a large, combat-trained man. She made a split-second decision based on fear. Then Lang stood up. He didn't yell. He walked over to the witness stand where Darius sat, looking dignified in a suit. Mr. Hayes? Lang asked. In your years of service, how many times were you in a situation where you feared for your life? Too many to count, Darius replied. Ambushes in Fallujah, sniper fire in the Hindu Kush. And in those moments of extreme fear, Lang continued, Did you ever panic and assault an innocent bystander? No, sir, Darius said. Discipline is what separates a soldier from a thug. And did Officer Hale seem afraid when she was mocking your service record and kicking your legs apart? No, sir. She seemed amused. The jury looked at Hale. She was sitting at the defense table wearing a modest cardigan, trying to look like a victim. But the jury had seen the video. They saw the sneer. They saw the arrogance. It took the jury to return a verdict. Not only did they award Darius $4.5 million in damages, bankrupting the city's insurance policy, but the judge, the Honorable Robert Novak, took an unusual step. He referred the transcripts immediately to the district attorney for criminal prosecution, stating, "The conduct displayed here is not just negligence, it is malice." The gavel had fallen, but the ringing in Hale's ears hadn't stopped since. The civil trial had been a massacre. The judgment of $4.5 million was a figure so large it felt abstract, like monopoly money. But the reality was far more concrete. The city had fired her. The union, which usually protected its own with the ferocity of a cornered badger, had issued a brief press release stating they condemned the actions of the former officer. Hale was radioactively toxic. She drove her cherry-red Dodge Charger, the one she had bought on a predatory loan with a high interest rate, assuming her overtime pay would cover it up the winding driveway of Highland Crest. This was the hill. It was where the judges, the mayors, and the police chiefs lived. It was where she had grown up believing she was untouchable. Her father's house, a sprawling colonial brick estate with white pillars, loomed in the gray twilight. It used to look like a castle to her. Tonight, with the storm clouds bruising the sky purple and black, it looked like a mausoleum. Hale parked the car. Her hands were shaking as she killed the engine. She checked her phone. No texts, no missed calls. Her inbox, usually full of invites to drinks with the squad, was empty. Even Officer Griggs, her partner, who had laughed at her jokes about cleaning up the streets, had blocked her number. She walked to the front door and used her key. It didn't turn. She frowned, jiggling it. It was stuck. She tried again. Nothing. She rang the doorbell, a sharp melodic chime that echoed inside. A full minute passed. Then the heavy oak door creaked open. It wasn't the housekeeper, Maria. It was Harlan Novak himself. The former chief of police looked like he had aged in days. He was wearing a silk robe over his dress shirt and slacks, a tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. His eyes, usually sharp and commanding, were bloodshot and rimmed with dark, sleepless circles. "Dad." Hale let out a breath, stepping forward. "The key didn't work. Did you change the locks?" Harlan didn't step aside to let her in. He stood in the doorway, a physical barricade. "I did," Harlan said. His voice was gravel grinding on glass. "Why?" "I need to get into the safe. I need cash. Dad, my lawyer, the cheap one the court gave me. He says if we want to appeal the wrongful termination suit, we need a private retainer. We need to hire a prestigious counsel, someone who plays golf with the appellate judges." Hale tried to push past him, but Harlan didn't budge. He took a sip of his drink, his eyes cold. "There is no appeal, Serena." "Of course there is." Hale's voice rose shrill and desperate. "We just need to prove the video was taken out of context. Darius Hayes provoked me. He was aggressive. You know how these people are." "Stop," Harlan said. It wasn't a shout. It was a flat, deadly command. "Just stop. You are still reading from a script that burned down. Do you have any idea what is happening out here in the real world while you wallow in self-pity? I'm the victim here. Hale screamed, the stress finally breaking her composure. I was doing my job. I was protecting this neighborhood, and now I'm the one being crucified by the media. You're the former chief. Fix it. Call Mayor Novak. Call Judge Novak. Tell them to back off. Harlan let out a short, dark laugh. He turned and walked into the foyer, leaving the door open just enough for her to follow. She scrambled inside out of the rising wind. The living room was dark, lit only by the embers of a dying fire. On the coffee table lay a stack of newspapers and a tablet displaying a news feed. Call them. Harlan picked up the tablet and threw it onto the sofa. I tried to call Novak yesterday. His secretary told me he was unavailable indefinitely. I tried to call Novak. He sent me a cease and desist letter through his attorney. Harlan turned on her, his face twisting into a snarl. They aren't taking my calls, Serena, because I am radioactive, because of you. Me? Hale scoffed. I'm just a beat cop. You're the legend. I was a legend. Harlan roared, the sound echoing off the high ceilings. Now I'm a suspect. He kicked the stack of newspapers. They fanned out across the Persian rug. Hale looked down. The headlines were screaming at her in bold black ink. The Novak legacy. Corruption runs deep. Former chief investigated for hiring fraud. Did Harlan Novak rig psych exams for family members? Hale froze. Her stomach dropped through the floor. They're looking into the academy records, she whispered. They are auditing everything. Harlan spat, pouring himself another drink with a shaking hand. The district attorney is looking for a scalp. He wants to show the voters he's tough on police corruption. And thanks to your little stunt with the Green Beret, he has the perfect excuse to tear my department apart. Harlan walked over to her, looming over her small frame. I spent years building this life. I called in every favor I had to get you that badge. You failed the written exam twice. I fixed it. You failed the psychological evaluation because the therapist said you lacked emotional regulation and had authority complex issues. I buried that report. I fired the therapist. Hale stepped back, her eyes wide. You never told me that. I didn't want to hurt your feelings. Harlan sneered. I thought you would grow into the badge. I thought the discipline would fix you, but you didn't grow up, Serena. You just got louder. You treated that badge like a crown instead of a shield, and now you've toppled the whole kingdom. I'm your daughter, Hale cried, tears streaming down her face now. You're supposed to protect me. I need money for the lawyer. I need a place to stay. The press is camped out on my lawn. I can't help you, Harlan said, turning his back on her to look into the fire. You mean you won't? I can't. Harlan slammed his glass down on the mantel, shattering it. My assets have been frozen, Serena pending the federal investigation. If I give you a single dime, they will charge me with aiding a suspect in conspiracy to obstruct justice. My lawyer was very clear. I have to cut ties. The silence that filled the room was suffocating. Hale felt like she was drowning. Her father, the man who had cleaned up every mess she had ever made, from the car crash in high school to the excessive force complaints in her rookie year, was cutting the rope. So that's it, Hale whispered, her voice trembling with betrayal. You're throwing me to the wolves to save your own skin. Harlan turned around. His face was devoid of love. It was the face of a politician looking at a liability. You are the wolf, Serena, he said coldly. You're the one who bit the wrong man. I'm just the fool who let you off the leash. He pointed to the door. Get out, Dad. Please, it's storming. I have nowhere to go. You should have thought about that before you put a gun to a soldier's head because you didn't like the color of his skin, Harlan said. Get out of my house and don't come back. If the press sees you here, it makes me look complicit. Hale stood there for a moment, waiting for him to crack, waiting for the dad who bought her ice cream after soccer practice to reappear. But that man was gone, consumed by the terrified, selfish ruin of Harlan Novak. She turned and walked out. The heavy door slammed shut behind her, the lock clicking, a sound that felt like a prison cell closing, but this time she was on the outside. Hale stumbled down the front steps. The rain had started in earnest now, a cold, stinging downpour that soaked her clothes instantly. She walked to her car, fumbling for her keys. She just wanted to get inside, turn on the heater, and drive until the gas ran out. She pressed the unlock button on her fob. Nothing happened. She pressed it again. The lights didn't flash, the doors didn't click. No, 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 she sobbed, jamming the physical key into the door. It opened, but when she turned the ignition, the engine was dead. The dashboard remained black. Then, blinding white lights flooded the driveway. A massive tow truck had backed silently up the long driveway while she was inside. It was a midnight recovery vehicle. Predatory repo men who specialized in snatching cars before the owners knew what was happening. A man in a yellow slicker jumped out. He didn't look at her. He moved with practiced speed, hooking chains under the front axle of her Charger. "Hey!" Hale screamed, running toward him, slipping on the wet pavement. "What are you doing? That's my car. I'm a police officer." The man paused. He looked at her, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. He was a big man, rough-looking, the kind of guy Hale used to pull over just to hassle. "You ain't police no more, lady." The man grunted. He checked a clipboard. "Serena Hale. Bank issued the repo order this morning. You missed payments, and with the employment termination on file, the loan is in default. You can't take it." Hale grabbed his arm. "It's all I have. Please just give me a week. I'll get the money." The man shook her off easily. He walked to the lever on his truck and yanked it. The hydraulics whined and the front of the Charger lifted into the air. "Bank's orders," he said, climbing back into the cab. "Get your personal crap out of the glove box if you want. You've got seconds." Hale scrambled to the passenger door. She grabbed her sunglasses, a handful of old receipts, and a photo of her and her dad from her graduation. She clutched them to her chest as the truck lurched forward. "Wait!" she screamed, but the driver ignored her. She watched as her car, her symbol of freedom, her pride and joy, was dragged down the driveway, the taillights disappearing into the gloom of the storm. Serena Hale stood alone in the driveway of the mansion that was no longer her home. She was soaked to the bone. She had no badge, no gun, no father, no car, no money. The wind howled through the trees, sounding eerily like the jeers of the crowd outside the courthouse. She looked down at the photo in her hand. Her father smiling, his arm around her shoulder, pinning the badge on her chest. The rain hit the photo, dissolving the ink. A drop of water hit Harlan's face, making it look like he was crying. Another hit Serena's face, blurring her into a smudge of gray. She crumpled the photo in her fist and let it drop into a mud puddle. She began the long, wet walk down the hill, toward the bus stop away. While the lights of Oak Haven flickered in the distance, a city she once thought she owned, but which had now thoroughly and completely rejected her. Years later, the neon sign of the Galaxy Diner buzzed with an annoying, insect-like hum, flickering on and off against the rainy backdrop of a Tuesday night. It wasn't the kind of place people went to celebrate. It was the kind of place people ended up when they had nowhere else to go. Inside, the air smelled of stale grease, burnt coffee, and regret. Serena Hale, formerly Officer Hale, formerly the daughter of the chief, formerly the woman who walked with a swagger that demanded submission, wiped down table 4 with a gray, damp rag. She was, but she looked older. Her blonde hair, once perfectly highlighted and pulled into a tight, tactical bun, was now limp, streaked with premature gray, and hastily shoved under a hairnet. She wore a pink uniform that was 2 sizes too tight and stained with ketchup near the hem. Her feet, stuffed into cheap non-slip shoes from Walmart, throbbed with a dull, rhythmic ache. "Serena, move it." The voice belonged to Riley, the night manager. Riley had acne scars, a Napoleon complex, and the power to fire her. He snapped his fingers at her from the pass-through window. "Order up on table 6. You're dragging your feet. You want to be cut from the shift because I got a stack of applications in the back." "I'm going, Riley." Hale muttered, her voice raspy. She grabbed the heavy tray of burgers. She hated her name here, Serena. It sounded weak. Nobody called her Serena anymore. Her father certainly didn't. Harlan Novak had died of a stroke after the trial, leaving behind a mountain of legal debt and a will that explicitly left the family estate to the policeman's benevolent association, not his disgraced daughter. Hale had applied to security firms, private investigation agencies, even mall cop gigs. But the moment they ran her background check, the moment federal civil rights violation popped up, along with the viral video of her screaming at a calm black veteran, the doors slammed shut. The internet never forgets. She was radioactive, so she served burgers. The bell on the front door jingled. "Table for 4, Riley shouted. "Serena, get the booth and put a smile on, for God's sake. You look like a funeral." Hale sighed, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She grabbed 4 laminated menus and kept her head down, walking toward the large corner booth near the window. She didn't look at the customers. She had learned it was better not to make eye contact. If she looked people in the eye, sometimes they recognized her. And when they recognized her, they didn't tip. Sometimes they even poured their water on the floor. "Welcome to the galaxy," she recited the script flatly, placing the menus on the table. "My name is Serena. I'll be taking care of you. Can I start you off with—" She looked up. The words died in her throat. The tray in her hand began to tremble, the glasses of water rattling against each other like chattering teeth. Sitting in the booth wasn't just a random family. The man was wearing a charcoal gray suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. On his lapel was a gold pin. City councilman. His face was older, lined with the kind of wisdom that comes from building things rather than destroying them. But his eyes were unmistakable. It was Darius Hayes. Next to him sat Alara, glowing and elegant, and between them was a young boy coloring on a placemat. Across from them sat a man Hale recognized from the papers, the new police chief, Marcus Reynolds, a man Darius had personally campaigned for to replace her father's corrupt regime. Hale felt the blood drain from her face, her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. "Please don't know me," she prayed. "Please let me be invisible." She looked down at her stained uniform, her rough hands, her cheap shoes. Then she looked at Darius. He was the picture of dignity. He was power. He was respect. Everything she had tried to strip from him on that driveway, he now possessed in abundance. And everything she had used to try and crush him, status, authority, financial security, she had completely lost. Darius was looking at the menu. He closed it and looked up, a polite smile on his face. "We'll start with some coffee and maybe some apple juice for the—" Darius stopped, his eyes locked onto hers. Time seemed to warp. The sounds of the diner, the sizzling grill, the clinking silverware. Riley shouting in the back faded into a dull roar. Darius stared. He didn't blink. He looked at the name tag that said Serena. Then back at her face, he saw the lines of exhaustion. He saw the fear. He saw the ghost of the woman who had once pointed a Glock 17 at his head and told him to eat dirt. Hale wanted to run. She wanted to drop the tray and sprint out the back door into the rain and never come back. But she couldn't. She needed this job. She had money in her bank account and rent was due. "Officer Hale," Darius said softly. It wasn't a question, or it was a statement of fact. Alara looked up sharply. The new police chief stiffened his eyes, narrowing as he recognized her, too. "It's Serena now?" Hale whispered, her voice cracking. "Just Serena." The silence at the table was suffocating. Chief Reynolds looked like he was about to say something, perhaps something harsh, but Darius raised a hand, stopping him. Darius looked at Hale. He didn't look at her with hate. He didn't look at her with anger. He looked at her with something far worse. Pity. "Coffee," Darius said, his voice even and calm. "Black and apple juice for my son, Silas." "Yes, right away." Hale turned and fled to the kitchen. Her hands were shaking so badly, she spilled coffee on the counter while pouring it. "Watch it," Riley barked, slapping the counter. "Coffee costs money. What is wrong with you today? You're acting like a junkie." "I'm sorry," Hale gasped, wiping the spill. I know them." "I don't care if you know the Pope," Riley sneered. "Get that table served. The guy in the suit is the new city councilman. He's the one funding the downtown renovation. You mess this up and you're done. You hear me? Done." Hale took a deep breath. She had to go back out there. She had to serve the man whose life she had tried to ruin. This was her penance. This was the karma the universe had been marinating. She walked back to the table. She placed the coffees down. She placed the juice box down. "Are you ready to order?" she asked, forcing her voice to be steady. "The steak and eggs," Darius said, not breaking eye contact. "Medium rare pancakes," Alara said, her voice cool, protective. As Hale wrote down the order, Silas, the little boy, looked up at her. He dropped his crayon. It rolled off the table and landed by Hale's foot. Hale bent down to pick it up. As she rose, she handed it to the boy. "Thank you, lady." Silas beamed. "You're welcome," Hale whispered. Darius watched the exchange. "Silas," he said to his son, "do you know what the most important rule is that Daddy teaches you?" Silas thought for a second. "Always tell the truth." "That's a good one." Darius nodded. "But the other one about how we treat people." "Oh," Silas chirped. "Don't judge a book by its cover, and violence is for protection, not for bullying." Hale flinched as if she'd been slapped. She knew that lesson wasn't just for the boy. "That's right," Darius said, his eyes drilling into Hale. "Because you never know who someone really is. The man fixing the gate might be a soldier, and the woman wearing the badge might be lost." Hale couldn't speak. The tears finally spilled over, tracking through the cheap foundation on her cheeks. She finished taking the order and rushed away. For the next hour, she served them. She refilled their water. She brought them extra napkins. She did it with her head bowed, playing the role of the servant, a stark reversal of the power dynamic she had abused. When they were finished, Darius asked for the check. Hale printed it out. Her heart was pounding. She walked over and placed the black folder on the table. I hope everything was okay," she stammered. Darius didn't open the folder. He looked at her. "How are you, Serena?" he asked. The question caught her off guard. I'm getting by." "I heard about your father," Darius said. "I'm sorry for your loss." Hale bit her lip. She wanted to scream. She wanted to yell, "It's your fault." But she knew it wasn't. It was hers. It was all hers. "Thank you," she said. "Life is long, Serena," Darius said, leaning forward slightly. "And it has a way of balancing the scales. You took minutes of my life and tried to turn it into a tragedy. I took years of my life and turned that tragedy into a triumph." He tapped the table. "You have a choice. You can stay in this diner angry at the world, blaming me, blaming the woke mob, blaming everyone but the person in the mirror. Or you can wake up. You can realize that the badge didn't make you special. Your character is what makes you special, and right now your character needs a lot of work." Hale couldn't speak. The tears finally spilled over, tracking through the cheap foundation on her cheeks. Darius stood up. He placed a stack of cash inside the folder. He didn't wait for change. "Come on, Alara. Chief, let's go." They walked out. The bell jingled. The heavy oak door closed, shutting out the rain and leaving Hale alone in the fluorescent hum of the diner. She opened the folder. The bill was $52.40. Inside lay 3 crisp $100 bills. $300. And on the back of the merchant copy receipt, Darius had written a note in the blue ink. Hale picked it up, her hands trembling. "I used the settlement money to build a mental health clinic for veterans. We treat people who have lost their way. We treat people with anger issues. We treat people who need a second chance. We have a program for civilians, too. If you are tired of serving burgers and want to serve your community for real without a gun, come to the center on Monday. Ask for the intake director. Tell him Darius sent you. But Serena, this is your last warning. Change, or this diner is as good as it gets." Hale stared at the money. It was more than she made in a week. She stared at the note. It wasn't just a tip. It was a ladder. He had thrown a rope down into the hole she had dug for herself. "Serena," Riley screamed from the kitchen, "Table 10 needs wiping. Stop counting your tips and move." Hale looked at Riley. Then she looked at the door where Darius had exited. She looked at the money. For the first time, the snarl left her face. The tension in her shoulders dropped. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She wasn't Officer Hale anymore. She never would be again. And for the first time, she realized that was a good thing. Officer Hale was a monster. But Serena, maybe Serena could be someone else. She pocketed the money and the note. "I'm coming, Riley," she called out, her voice stronger than it had been all night. She grabbed the spray bottle and walked toward the table 10. But her eyes were fixed on the window, watching the tail lights of Darius's truck fade into the dark, wet night. Karma had hit her hard. It had broken her. But as she touched the note in her pocket, she realized that sometimes you have to be completely broken before you can be built back right. Now, that is how you handle your enemies. Darius didn't scream. He didn't fight. And he didn't lower himself to her level. He let life do the heavy lifting. And when he finally had the chance to crush her, he offered her a path to redemption instead. That is the difference between a bully and a warrior. Serena lost her badge, her fortune, and her pride. But she might have just gained her humanity thanks to the very man she tried to destroy. What do you guys think? Did Serena deserve that job offer? Or should Darius have just left her to rot in that diner? I want to see your debates in the comments section. Right now, I read every single one. If this story moved you, please destroy that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you get notified every time we drop a new story of justice served cold. Thanks for watching, and remember, be careful who you step on, because they might just be the one holding the ladder you need.